If you're the parent of an adolescent or teen, you probably know some of the challenges you face to do that well. And yet imagine interacting with thousands of teens over decades, what you would learn. Well, in this session, I interview Linda Videll, who not only gives us insights to parenting teens, but also especially parenting teen leaders because they can be even more challenging. You're going to love this session.
Welcome to another edition of Kid Lead Academy Training Series with Dr. Alan E. Nelson, designed to help parents develop their children to lead so they can succeed. And now, here's Alan.
Hey, welcome today. I am excited for you and also for myself to learn from our guest speaker today. Linda Videll has over 25 years of experience as a school counselor. She just recently retired, and she has a master's degree in counseling, and she really loves investing in youth and obviously in their families. So we're going to talk to her about some of the things she's learned, how she can help us as parents understand our kids better and relate to them better. And so, Linda, thank you so much for joining me today.
Absolutely.
Hey, I should have mentioned also that you're a mom, right? So you're not just like a smart guru who's been a counselor, but you've raised two adult children. And so I'm excited about how you can tie that into parenting as well. So let's just start with kind of some of the basics. You have interacted with hundreds, probably thousands of teenagers and students over the years. What would be some things that just sort of off the top of your head would help us as parents relate better to our teens? What are some of the things maybe you see mistakes that parents make and or some ways that have made you successful as a counselor?
Oh, let's see. I think that relating to your child and seeing them not as young, but allowing them to be an equal while you're talking to them, because they are really young adults. I worked with high schoolers all the time, so treating them as an equal and just listening to their thought process and not interrupting creates the strongest bond and allows you to be able to almost disagree, but kindly, if you have given them your full attention and allowed them to speak their mind.
Interesting.
That's the first thing whenever a student comes in and they've got a story to tell, just let them talk, because sometimes you kind of have to dig as to where they're coming from and their perspective, and validate their perspective and then move forward.
In one of the other vodcasts we've done, I mentioned that idea that I learned from a psychologist who wrote a book called Teen 2.0. And when I interviewed him, because I was intrigued with the book, because I'm looking at through the lens of leaders, right? Because a lot of times leaders are challenging kids to raise, right? And challenging teenagers. But he said a lot of parents, they don't realize it, but they're they're infantilizing their teen. They're treating them like infants. And then we wonder why we have so much rebellion in our culture. Because historically, teens haven't rebelled against their parents or against authority, but it seems like the longer we keep them at home, keep them in school, the more we treat them like little kids. And like you said out of the chute here, you said they're really young adults, and I agree 100%. Yeah. How does a parent make that shift, though? Because they probably look at their 15-year-old and still see their little 5 or 10-year-old.
You know what I always suggest is taking your child by themselves to McDonald's for a Coke or get an ice cream and go for a walk, but just get to know them as they're maturing, because all of a sudden they start making different sense to you as you communicate. And I know that sometimes it can be hard as a working parent to find that time, but to be very intentional with trying to find that individual time to not miss your child as they're growing. And I raised one very leadership type of child, so I really do understand how they can be a little more challenging, because they really sometimes don't have an easy time at listening to your different perspective, because I believe they feel like you're challenging them head on versus trying to communicate. And then another that was so easy that, yeah, she grew herself.
Yeah.
So, but each child is different. So finding that alone time, respecting their perspective, even if you disagree, and then trying to have a very calm conversation and lead them with your knowledge and your experience, but never condescending. That'll get you nowhere.
You brought up the leadership component. Let's talk about that a little bit. So one of the things we do, especially in helping parents develop the leadership potential of their child, which Kid Lead Academy is really all about, a lot of times leaders can be strong-willed. I think you can be strong-willed and not a leader. You can just be stubborn,
Totally.
right? And sometimes leaders are not necessarily strong-willed. They learn to be, compliant when they need to be, and they can step up. But as a general rule, we see that leaders tend to have a pretty strong will. So what would be some advice you could give parents to help, discipline that will without breaking the spirit?
Absolutely. And I was thinking of this question, just trying to even prepare to speak with you. And by the time they get to high school, some of them have either been taught that their opinion doesn't matter. They have been treated incorrectly with their leadership personality, and they almost become defiant. And, a lot of our alternative high schools are full of strong leaders and highly intelligent students that have not been given the challenges that they need or the correct guidance. Because I do think lots of times, and it's not always apparent, some of the teachers feel like they're being challenged. And so maybe their own insecurities dampens a student from growing. And so it really is at home so critical that you teach your child even how to ask questions or how to share their ideas with a group, because not all are going to be bossy or sound rude by any means, but it can come across that way to some people that are not feeling confident. And so, yeah,
So I hear you say, really, we need to start younger, right? Younger, the teenage years to begin
yes,
that process.
yes.
And I've not heard people say that, but I agree with you. And I'm glad you said that. A lot of the challenge kids, whether it's a continuation school or tech school, whatever, I believe that's true, that a lot of them are misunderstood leaders. They've gotten
Mhm.
sideways. Maybe they didn't know how to use their strong will or use their opinions in a right way.
Right.
And they got sideways with the administration or sideways with adults. And then they got pegged as a troublemaker. I know I'm interviewing you, but it reminded me of the story. We were working with some kids with First T in Salinas, and Salinas has a lot of problems with adolescent violence
Okay.
because of the gangs from Mexico. And so it was interesting because I had one of the people we were training say, okay, one of the kids who we invited to this program today, he was kicked out because he's a troublemaker. He said, he was kind of challenging me. He said, see if you can guess who it is. So I'm watching the kids come in, and they're, middle schoolers. And this kid walked in with a purple shirt, and he kind of had that swagger, right?
Uh-huh.
So I leaned over to the guy and I said, is that kid right there? And he was shocked. He said, how did you know? I said, I could just tell. I mean, he
Mhm.
had that swag, and he walked in sort of confidently, but the program had kind of given up on him, right? Because they didn't know how to handle him.
Mhm.
And I thought during these activities, he was just an exceptional leader. And at the end, I gave him my business card. I had nothing to give him, but I wanted to give him something. I said, man, you're a good leader. And I
Oh,
think you got a lot of potential. And I think, Linda, you've probably seen too that if we don't turn these kids to the light, they become the gang leaders, right? They're good leaders, but they go to the dark
absolutely.
side. Talk to us more about
Absolutely.
what you've seen in terms of the the kids that maybe get misunderstood, and or how could we as adults, or how could schools do it differently? How could we change the way we treat those kids?
Well, whether you know it or not, you just gave a really good example, because the young man who walked in with the swagger, quite honestly, like your heart almost just goes directly to him, right? Because his leadership personality is coming out with just his walk, and to give that student a compliment that, wow, you're a good leader, I am going to bet you $1 million that he softened. He saw that he had value and was respected. He didn't have to earn it. And now he could actually become who he was in that setting to his full capacity, because he felt the value. Now, every single student in that room needs to hear something, but that young man needed to hear that you valued him and that he was a good leader. And I think it's simple. I don't think we need to do a lot, but respecting and liking kids, they will become who they're meant to be, because they don't have to fight it, and they know you like them even if you're telling them to sit back down.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think it's easy. It's easier than we make it.
That's interesting. That's interesting. It's easier than we make it. Why do you think adults, or why do you think systems haven't done better figuring out how we can treat these people with dignity as young adults, as opposed to still treating them like kids?
I think there's a lot that goes into that, and each individual family member, each individual classroom, each individual grouping of students creates a whole different environment for each individual. But if each individual can come in feeling like they matter and that they know they have value, they're going to be okay, regardless of what comes at them. And I think that's where the family unit is so critical, because you can't guarantee you're going to find that teacher that's going to take that extra time, or that counselor that actually gets the privilege of getting to know the student at that level. This high schools, I think when I was in California, it was 1,200 to 1 ratio at the public high school. So you don't get the privilege of getting to know each kid, versus my last school was 250 to 1. So after 4 years, I felt like I could recognize when somebody did something awesome and call them in and let them know I saw it. But being able to acknowledge that you've seen what they're doing, like you mentioned in your Lead Well book about being, noticing what they're doing, being specific with what you saw, and congratulating them on what they did good. It goes miles for making that relationship, for that person to become strong. You did it to me, Alan, when I was in I was the beginning, of a young mom and becoming a leader myself, actually, as an adult with young adults. And you hand over the reins and told me I could do it. And I believed you, so, and so off I went and gave it a shot and ended up going into high school counseling. So there's a very good chance you believing in me allowed me to become a high school counselor for 25 years.
Well, that is good to hear. I've
Yes.
never heard that story before. See, and
Yeah.
and I'm having fun with you, right? Because you've been family friends. But I think you make a good point that sometimes we don't know the effect we have on another person, right? Positive
Absolutely.
or negative, right? But it does. It kind of has an echo effect, and they hear that echo over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So talk to me about, and I'm not, I believe in public education. I believe in private education. I believe in homeschooling. We've done all three with our kids. So
Mhm.
I'm not here to diss public schools at all. That is a tough
Mhm.
job. What, from your perspective, could schools and or educators do better to recognize those leader students in their class and give them a sense of experience or affirmation without giving up all control of their class over to them. Does that make sense? What can we
It
do to
does.
get better as educators?
It does, and it's a tough question, unfortunately, because we have people that are teaching that have also grown up, that have also either been nurtured correctly or not, that have had either a positive experience with their schooling experience or a negative one. And there they are trying to make a difference, but their own insecurities are shining through. I've always thought, boy, if we have to have a class on how to tell somebody to discipline a child and take them into the hallway and be polite to them, and they learned something from that lesson, maybe they shouldn't be an educator.
Mm,
You know, I mean,
interesting.
you kind of hope common sense is telling everybody that you don't belittle a child and you don't make them feel singled out in front of a group. But there are those people that do. Um, and sometimes even the politics in a school setting, if a principal is not esteeming and not telling people they're doing a good job, now the teacher's already feeling that they aren't doing a good job, and they come in. There are so many factors. And so, I wish there was control. Each individual is going to have a different thing that they bring every day. You didn't have breakfast, the teacher didn't have breakfast, somebody had a fight at home. I mean, like, it all piles into this. So I think that that's once again where it becomes down to that family unit, and the people watching this or the people looking at your program are probably those people that are grounded and focusing on their family unit. And I'm so grateful for those children.
I think you bring out a good point that I think many times we have expected our public institutions to be parents, to take over the role of the family. I think that's very unfortunate because that isn't their role, right? You can't really do that. And
I agree.
occasionally you have those role models who are like the great father or like the great mother,
Mhm.
but it's hard to do in an environment of education where maybe your ratio is 1 to 48 or 1 to 28. It's just a tough thing. What
Right.
what what sort of closing advice or wisdom could you give to parents who maybe they're having a little bit of conflict and they're trying to say, hey, my little compliant 5 to 10-year-old is now sort of grown wings and I'm
Yeah.
afraid of losing them. What kind of advice might you give them to make sure that they don't go off the deep end?
Never lose the fact that you are still the parent and in control. I think a lot of parents make the mistake of trying to be a friend and try to avoid conflict, and it's okay to discipline. It's okay. Not cruelly, but it's okay to take the game away. It's okay to make them earn something. It's okay to give them chores. It's okay to say you're not going out for the next couple weekends. This action that you just had is not something that I agree with, and I want to guide you in becoming a better human. That is what discipline is for, is guiding your child how to become a better person. And they in return will be grateful for it because their goal is to be a better person as well. So, I've had parents not understand that they could take a Game Boy away for a weekend. You can, so just be in control, not to the level at which the child doesn't have any say, but it's okay to own your role as a parent and keep it until you feel comfortable. Obviously, even 18 to 20 somethings, you're frequently still the parent. Even though they are presenting as adults and they are making good decisions, they're also making bad decisions, and it's okay. Give them the freedom to do the bad decision, but don't judge them and be there for them so that they can learn from it and rise up.
My wife and I mean, we come from very similar values, sort of an orientation in both our families. But
Mhm.
my wife and I have had multiple conversations about what if our kid does this or what if our kid does this. Even though it's never happened for the most part, we sort of pre-planned our response. so that we wouldn't come across as condemning or ostracizing. And sometimes when we hear parents who, they won't attend their child's wedding, or they won't attend some
Yeah.
significant event because of value differences, I scratch my head and I think, why would you do that? Even just because you disagree with them doesn't mean you alienate them. But
Oh,
I guess some people do, and then they wonder why they die an old person alone, right?
oh.
It just
Our
amazes
children,
me.
me too. Our children are gifts.
Yeah.
They are blessings. They are huge blessings. We might not feel it every day. And you might have a moment too where you think, should I be a counselor? But, you know, somebody has to do it. And it might as well be you, and you find that strength. And maybe you need to, just like when your child was in a crib or throwing a fit, and sometimes you had to put them in the crib and walk away for a couple of minutes because you yourself had to take care of you and then go try again. And that is going to be throughout parenting. It's just going to look different.
Yeah.
So taking your deep breath, saying a quick prayer and asking for those words of wisdom and the guidance, and then jump back in. But never ever make your child feel like you don't love them.
Yeah.
Don't ever let them feel like you're so disappointed in them that you can't believe it, because we all are going to make mistakes even as adults, and we need people to be patient with us.
Yeah. And that's true. That's so true. Linda,
Mhm.
you are a deep well, and we're going to come back and get more water from you, I'm sure, in the future. But thank you for our
Cool.
time together. Thank you for giving us some of your wisdom. And you're just such a delightful person. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you. This is fun.